¿Qué tal? Buenos días a todos. Gracias por acompañarnos esta mañana. El British Council tiene el gusto de llevar a ustedes el seminario Virtual Engaging Children, el seminario virtual Engaging Children in Virtual Time con Carol Reed. Este evento ha sido posible gracias a la colaboración del British Council y el Programa Nacional de Inglés a nivel federal. Carol Reed visitó México el pasado mes de febrero 2020 en el marco de nuestra conferencia Vive Best of British ELT. Ella presentó la plenaria de apertura en el evento titulada How to Survive and Thrive as Language Teacher of Children. En ese entorno, el licenciado Sark Wolowski, representante nacional del programa PRONI, tuvo la oportunidad de discutir con Carol retos y oportunidades de la enseñanza del idioma inglés en educación básica en el sector público. El licenciado Wolowski hizo entonces una invitación formal a Carol para que presentara esta sesión y Carol amablemente aceptó. Esto es lo que nos trae a este momento en este espacio. Por tal motivo, quiero agradecer al licenciado Wolowski por la oportuna llamada a este seminario, que Carol haya aceptado amablemente presentarlo, y por eso quiero ceder el micrófono al licenciado Wolowski para que sea él el que nos dirija unas palabras.
Muchas gracias, Liliana. Muy buenos días. Pues has dado una introducción muy adecuada para todos quienes van a poder disfrutar, porque en realidad es un disfrute escuchar a una especialista tan importante como lo es Carol Reed en un tema y una orientación dirigida hacia los docentes y asesores externos y todos los que colaboran en la tarea pues, del trabajo frente a grupo y en este caso pues, el trabajo a distancia y por los medios virtuales que nos es posible. Yo te agradezco infinitamente en calidad como Programa Nacional de Inglés, el que nos abran esas oportunidades, el que confluyamos en esos espacios de oportunidad y a especialistas como Carol. De verdad, México está muy atento, muy abierto a conocer experiencias, a retroalimentarnos mutuamente de quienes, pues en su trayectoria y en su hoja de vida han acumulado un gran expertise que en este caso nos va a transmitir en una pues breve sesión, pero no limitándonos a ellos solamente a escucharlas, sino también invitando a nuestros profesores también a hacer investigación, a buscar fuentes, a buscar pues medios que nos permitan ir complementando este tipo de experiencias. Carol, bienvenida virtualmente a México al Programa Nacional de Inglés. Liliana, muchas gracias por permitirme estas palabras.
Al contrario, muchísimas gracias, licenciado Sar, porque en realidad usted hizo posible este seminario con la muy oportuna invitación a Carol. Entonces, without any further ado, I would like to introduce Carol Reed. Today's webinar, is Engaging Children in Virtual Time. Given the uncertainty of the coronavirus crisis, we need to ensure continuity in children's education and be ready to teach English remotely. The concept of engaging is crucial in sustaining children's interest and ensuring that learning takes place. During this webinar, Carol and you will explore a range of practical ideas for stories, activities, and games that can be flexibly adapted to keep your children engaged and learning. You will also discuss 10 key principles that will help you to ensure children and learning success. Carol, as many of you know, has over 30 years experience in ELT as a teacher, teacher trainer, academic manager, material writer, and educational consultant. Carol's main specialization is in early years and primary language teaching. Her publications include 500 activities in the primary classroom, American Tiger, Footprints, and Ferris Wheel, all published by Macmillan Education. Carol is a former president of IATEFL, the International Association of Teachers of English as a Foreign Language, And you can find more about Carol by visiting her page, www.carolreed.com. Please join me to welcome Carol Reed. Thank you very much, Carol.
Thank you, Liliana. Thank you very much for that lovely introduction. And first of all, let me say how wonderful it is to be back in Mexico in spirit and working with teachers during this difficult time that everyone is going through. And to start off my presentation, Exactly. We're going to be talking about engaging children in virtual time. And I think the first thing to say is that engagement is to do with being absorbed in the challenge of learning, and through that engagement, making observable progress. For teachers, engagement is the starting point of everything. In a quotation by Andy Griffith and Mark Burns, they say that engagement is the fertile soil that enables sustainable learning to take root and flourish. So actually engagement refers to the intensity and emotional quality of children's involvement in initiating and carrying out learning activities. And engaging children in virtual time is something that teachers all over the world have had to adapt to this year. And I think we've probably all learned a lot since March when the pandemic started. But it's nevertheless worth establishing from the start that what I'm talking about today, as you can see on the screen now, is usually called emergency remote teaching. And you might like to take a moment to read this definition. So that essentially what we're looking at in this session is how to marshal all our resources and skills to ensure that children's education continues as smoothly and positively as possible in the current circumstances before we can go back to our physical classrooms. I'd like to start off by looking at practical ideas using easily available resources which will help you to keep children engaged and learning in virtual time. These are essentially adapted from face-to-face practice, the best place to start. And I'd then like to use these practical ideas to establish 10 key principles of online engagement with children. So the first area then, to do with using puppets. When teaching remotely, one of the things that's hard and that children miss is the physical presence of their teacher. A puppet can help you create a warm and effective learning climate. The puppet becomes the children's friend. The puppet has feelings and can be happy, sad, cold, tired. Over the years, I've used all kinds of puppets, and some of them I've put in that photo there now. Finger puppets, pencil puppets, oven glove puppets, sock puppets. Even I had an umbrella once which had the head of a duck. They don't need to be sophisticated. The important thing is that they have a name and a personality, and that you make sure that the puppet shows interest and affection for the children, as well as opening and closing routines, of course, saying hello, singing a song, that kind of thing. You can use the puppet to demonstrate activities and also to help you manage the class. There are also many activities and games you can use. For example, just to go through a few, guess what the puppet's thinking about. Can we go back to the puppets, please? Guess what the puppet's thinking about. You can use 3 to 6 flashcards or objects, and the children guess. They either say or write the answer in the chat box. Correcting the puppet. The puppet may be silly and get things wrong. For example, the ball is blue. Oh no, Rosie, or whatever the puppet is called. The ball is red. We can do a game like Simon Says. Follow the puppet's instruction, but use the puppet's name instead. Rosie says, Wave your arms, please. Rosie says, move your head. And if she doesn't say please, you don't do anything. We can also have a simple bag. Guess what's in the puppet's bag? What's in the bag? Can you guess? It's a pencil. Yes, yes, yes. Okay. So moving on to our next area of resources, using real objects. One of the good things about teaching from home is that it's much better and easier to get hold of real objects. And the kinds of games you can play include what's missing. So for example, you can either switch off your camera for a moment or use a cover, and children either say or write in the chat box what's missing. So can you write in the chat box now? What's missing? Can you tell me? Yes, okay, tomato, very good. Are you ready for another one? Are you ready? Off we go, write in the chat box. What's missing? Chocolate, fantastic. Okay, and one more. Are you ready? What's missing? Have a look there. What's missing? And it's an apple, of course. Okay, so very simple games like this that engage children. Another game that we can use, which also develops deliberate memory, is to either use items from one lexical set, as we have here on the tray, or mix them up and cover them and ask children how many they can remember. So would you like to write in the chat box now how many you can remember? Okay, fantastic. Lovely, okay. So other games we can use, let's see now to check our answers. Okay, we might play a guessing game. For example, describe one of the objects very simply and children guess what it is. So at a very simple, low level, you can eat it. It's yellow. It's a banana, of course. We can play I spy with my little eye. Maybe I spy with my little eye something beginning with P or P, depending on if children know the alphabet, okay? And they may say pear or pizza, okay? Or I spy with my little eye a fruit that's green. Another activity that we can do with real objects when we're working remotely is to choose 4 or 5 objects. Children think of their own criteria for the odd one out. For example, we might have banana, tangerine, apple, pear. And children might respond, banana, because it doesn't grow on a tree. Tangerine, because it's the only citrus fruit. And children come up with creative responses. Another activity we can do, depending on our background and where we're teaching, is hide and seek. We switch off the camera, we hide an object, children then ask questions and guess. And we can also do an activity that gets children standing up and moving away from their screen with real objects. For example, we might say, go and get something you need to go to the beach. Go and get something you use in your daily routine. Go and get a vegetable that you like. Children can also show their items quickly or slowly, and the others in the class guess what they are. If you are able to use breakout rooms, you can also organize a scavenger hunt, a list of objects that children have to go and get as fast as they can. And the objects might be a set that lead in to a topic or story. Moving on to our next area is show and tell. Show and tell gives an opportunity for personalized speaking and for you to show interest and care and get to know the children. It's a good way of training other children to listen, and it's helpful to set a task. So we're going to listen to Maria, but be ready to ask her one question. Show and tell builds children's confidence in speaking and develops their self-esteem. It also lays the foundations for the ability to make presentations in the future. As a matter of course, you should always model show and tell activities first. Start very simply. For example, if children are learning about toys, you might show children one of your favourite toys. This is my teddy bear, it's brown. Then ask children to bring one of their favourite toys, show it to the class and say, this is my car, it's red. For longer show and tells, you may like to assign a different child for each lesson. For example, children can bring and talk about a photo of their family or a photo of a special occasion. Other children listen and ask questions. Show and tell can also include children talking about their pets or their bedroom or their favourite book or their favourite clothes. Moving on then to our next area, using actions. Just as in a real classroom, children can't sit in front of a screen for long. And so games with actions give children a physical break and are really important. So here, very simply, using this flashcard and coloured arrows, we might do a game where we say the colour and children name and touch that part of the body. So if I go red, they go head. If I say blue, they go arms, and so on. We might also do a cumulative action game, which we can also make rhythmic. You can try doing this with me at home, if you like. Okay, are you ready? So, move your head. Move your head and your feet. Move your head and your feet and your arms. Move your head and your feet and your arms and your hands, and so on. Okay, and to do that, you don't necessarily have to have a PowerPoint or anything, and you can be standing up yourself and doing the actions with the children. Another activity using actions is mirroring. You do actions and children mirror you. In other words, they copy and say exactly what you do. So for example, are you ready to do it? Although I know I can't check. I'm brushing my hair. I'm washing my hands. I'm cleaning my teeth. You can go faster and add actions cumulatively as children get used to the activity. You can also do a magic spell mime. And of course, this is an opportunity for me to show you my witch puppet, but you don't really need a witch puppet. You could just use a ruler as a magic wand. But the activity goes like this. You say, abracadabra, listen to me. You're a butterfly. 1, 2, 3. You turn your camera off, and when you turn your camera on again, all the children are doing actions to show that they're a butterfly. So this is a way of involving children, of getting them moving around, even when they are in front of a screen. Another activity we can do using actions is a typical true-false activity. So we say to the children, stand up and wave your arms if it's true. Stand up and fold your arms if it's false. And we can then have true and false sentences based on the topic that we're doing. So for example, crocodiles are reptiles. So the children will stand up and wave their arms. Snakes are mammals. Fold their arms and do nothing. We can also, with actions, play a guessing game. And to do this, we can either project a sheet with options for actions that relate to the topic, or depending on what we're using, we can send a private message in a chat box to different children, obviously choosing ones who are confident, particularly at first. Children then take turns to do and act out the actions, and the others guess. And a nice variation of this is to do a fairy tale guessing game, if your children are familiar with traditional fairy tales. So you might send children a private message in the chat box, and children choose. So it could be, for example, I'm picking flowers, I'm putting on a shoe, I'm eating soup. And children do the actions, and the others name them and identify the fairy tale. So Little Red Riding Hood, obviously, for flowers, Cinderella for putting on a shoe, and I'm eating soup for the Three Bears story. Of course, it's also a good idea and keeps in children engaged and involved if we incorporate actions for classroom procedures. For example, for a technology check, wave if you can see me, stand up if you can hear me. We can also use actions for learning reviews. Jump up and down if you can remember all the words, or thumbs up, flat, or down to express how they're doing or feeling. So even when we're teaching remotely, there are many possibilities of engaging children kinesthetically. And as we all know, young children cannot sit and concentrate in front of a screen for very long, and they need to be continually engaged. Moving on to our next area, and this is using mini whiteboards. Mini whiteboards are completely wonderful. They can be homemade. The one I've projected here is homemade. It's simply putting a sheet of paper into a plastic envelope and then writing on the plastic using, or drawing on the plastic using non-permanent pens. Okay, this is how I started during the lockdown, because I didn't have a mini whiteboard. And as soon as it was possible to go to a shop and buy one, it's something that I invested in, and it is worth every centimo, as we would say here. Okay, and many, many ideas for getting children involved in doing things during lessons, developing motor skills, personalization, investment, and ownership of learning. So it can be really simple. Children may draw, for example, a pet they like from a story or unit of work. They then show and tell the class, I like the cat. Or they can do a guessing game with their pictures. Do you like the cat? Yes, I do. No, I don't. We could also do a sentence chain. So children might draw different food items on their mini whiteboards, one each, and then take turns to hold the pictures up and say their sentences cumulatively. So, for example, Luis likes bananas, Maria likes cake, and I, showing it up, I like pizza, and so on. We can also use our mini whiteboards for a picture dictation. So we dictate a picture and colours relevant to a unit of work or story, and children can then hold up and compare their drawings. Another activity that's really simple to do and for checking comprehension, get children to write yes on one side of their whiteboard and no on the other. You can then say sentences related to under comprehension of a topic or a story, and they hold up the side which applies. So, for example, rainforests have got tall trees, and they hold up yes. It rains a lot in the desert, and they hold up no. And of course, we can get children to take turns to say true-false sentences too. Another activity that works very well using mini whiteboards is to have anagrams of words from familiar lexical sets, and children identify the words. Or we could just write the initial letter of a word on the whiteboard. I'm thinking of an animal. It starts with L, and I write that on my whiteboard and show it. For learning reviews, mini whiteboards are fantastic. And I would actually suggest that when we're teaching remotely, we need to do learning reviews more frequently to keep our children with us and to make learning visible. Children can do something as simple as draw emojis on their whiteboard. For example, a smiley face, a straight line, a downturned mouth, to give feedback on how well they think they've learnt or understood something. Or we could also use coloured pens for traffic lights, red, orange, green. Another activity I like very much is to get children to draw around their hands on their mini whiteboard, and then to write one thing they can now do after the unit of work or story on each finger. You can use your own whiteboard too, to draw a picture, to introduce a topic or story, or to revise vocabulary. Children guess what you're drawing, and they always love it if you're like me and you're not very good at drawing and it's quite difficult to guess. You can also use your mini whiteboard for building up a character together. And another lovely way to use your mini whiteboard is to draw a heart or a smiley face on your whiteboard and show it to the children when they're doing really well, and in order to give positive feedback for their efforts. So, mini whiteboards, moving on now to the next area of resources, and that is using art and craft activities. Now you might think, how on earth can we do art and craft activities when we're teaching remotely? But simple art and craft activities, which aren't complicated and don't take too long to make, provide opportunities for authentic listening and the physical manipulation of making something provides variety and helps to keep children engaged. Art and craft can also provide an important bridge between synchronous and asynchronous learning. For example, you might get children to make a zigzag. This is a zigzag book, sometimes called an accordion book, or an origami book, very simply made from a single sheet of paper with folds that you demonstrate and show the children in the lesson, and they follow, and then they complete it in their own time after the lesson, and then bring the completed version back to do show and tell in the next lesson. Or another popular activity with children, and I think it's one that children in Mexico also know as well, a snapdragon or a fortune teller, okay, which you can have different things on each level of it, and then children can actually try it out on their parents and children, on their parents and siblings after the lesson. And that's a lovely way of reinforcing the homeschool link, which is so important as well. And the character cutouts here, these simple animal characters, are actually used for retelling a story, and they provide that physical manipulation and engagement and purpose for listening as you tell a story. And actually, I don't think you can quite see the reference on the bottom of the slide there, but at the end of the session, I'm going to give you references for where you can see that happening in action. Okay, so using art and craft then is another really important resource that we can use in our remote teaching, and that links our remote teaching with offline teaching and what we're doing to support the children's learning with the home link as well. Moving on to our next area, which is using images. Exactly. Using images, we have images in our course books, which we can use. Otherwise, we can use, and I'm sorry, I don't think you can see the reference at the bottom of the screen there, it doesn't matter. But what my point is that we need to use license-free sources for images. And this one actually comes from, Pixabay.com, which is one of many sites where you can find images that you can use without any problem. So using an image, we can do a range of activities. To start off with this one, I would actually, could we go back to the dolphin? Thank you. Okay, I would actually start off by asking, I've told you the answer already. I was going to say, what is it? Okay, and children can, give their answers, make their guesses in the chat box. What I would also use an image like this to do is a visible thinking routine, which is probably maybe familiar to some of you from the Harvard Project Zero. And this visible thinking routine, see, think, wonder. Okay, so first of all, we get children to say what they see. Dolphin, yes, fantastic. Okay, so what do you see in the picture? Do put things in the chat box. Yes, lovely. What do you see? So they can talk about the sea, the dolphin, the happy smile on the dolphin's face, the teeth. What do you think? What do you think? What do you think about that dolphin? I think that dolphin is about to eat something. I think that dolphin is following a boat. Any ideas in the chat box there? Okay, and wonder. I wonder how dolphins jump out of the sea, for example. Okay, different ideas. Another activity I do with this one is, I wonder if the dolphin is good to eat. Oh, yeah, okay, lovely. I'd say to the children, are you ready? I want you to very quickly tell me how many teeth you can see. How many teeth? Okay, and this is they're focused, they're counting. I don't give them very long. I want them to guess. How many teeth can you see? Any ideas in the chat box? And then I would cover that image. Okay, and actually, when I did this, I could see 64, which is probably wrong. But then it's interesting to learn that actually dolphin, I don't know if you knew this, but dolphin have between 80 and 100 teeth. And but actually they don't use them when they eat fish. They swallow the fish whole. So why do dolphins have all these teeth? It's quite an interesting point. Anyway, another activity we might do using just the image is a speech or thought bubble competition. So what is the dolphin thinking or saying? Any creative ideas in the chat box? I'd love to see. Okay, right, okay. We can also, of course, use images as a springboard into self-directed investigation and project work to be done outside the lesson. And for this, we might use a KWLH grid, a graphic organizer. And this is a wonderful way of integrating language skills, thinking skills, research skills, metacognitive skills. The grid usually has 3 columns, okay, what I already know, what I want to know, and what I've learned. But I actually like to add a 4th column to get children to reflect on the process of their learning too. So using the image of the dolphin as a springboard children complete the grid with things they already know about dolphins. Can we see that? Exactly. They then formulate questions about what they want to find out. So their questions, can we see those? What they want to know? Exactly. And we can either do this, getting children to copy the chart, or we could have it on a shared Google document, or we could also use a tool like Padlet, which some of you may be familiar with. Can we see Padlet now? Exactly. That this is actually using the wallpaper format. You put the link in the chat box and children post the questions that they're interested in finding out about dolphins. And children can then, for example, we might say to them, please choose 3 questions to investigate, or all the questions that you're interested in. And outside the lesson, in asynchronous time, children do research and prepare a presentation or a fact file on dolphins to the class, possibly using a children's search engine such as Kiddle, which is one that you may be familiar with. We can also use an image like that as the basis of inquiry-based learning. Inquiry-based learning, exactly. So a question like this, why are dolphins amazing animals? And inquiry-based learning, of course, builds on children's curiosity and what they know, leading to discovery in an autonomous and motivated way, followed by reflection on learning. Children do their research independently and then justify their opinions. And I think you can probably see there that in a question as open as this is also a way of differentiating learners, because differentiating learning, because depending on how children are ready, they can answer the question at different levels of difficulty. We can use images for many other activities. Just one more example is in creating poetry, a poem. And this photos of scenes are very useful for this. And we might start, before we show the image, with a short visualization activity. We could ask our children to close their eyes. Of course, they're not likely to all do that, but we can still do it anyway. And imagine you can feel the sand on your toes and the wind in your hair. You can hear the waves breaking on the shore. Where are you? And the children tell you. You show the image. And of course, a visualization activity like that gives you an opportunity to create an appropriate mood and also to introduce and revise vocabulary. What you can then go on to do is to use a 5 senses web as the basis for creating a poem with the whole class. And at a very low level, primary outcome might be something like, I see grey sea, I hear the wind, I smell the sea, I taste the salt, and I touch the soft yellow sand. So what we can then, we build that up together with the children in class. Children then copy the 5 senses web and use a different image of their choice, either a copyright-free one or from family photos, and the same technique to write individual poems. And the 5 senses provide a framework to writing a simple poem or a description. And children can upload their poems to a shared document, or, and this works very, very well, they can make a video recording of saying their poems and sending them to you. And parents are always more than delighted, often, usually, I should say, to collaborate with their children. And if you like, you can then share 1 or 2 of the video recordings with the whole group, and the others write positive comments in the chat box and what they like. And talking about video recordings leads us into the final resource that I'm going to talk about in this session, and this is making and using video recordings. Now, we have internet videos provides us with a huge source and variety of videos that you can use in or out of online lessons. These include picture book read alouds by the authors of children's books. They include animated stories and children's songs. There is more than we can possibly choose from out there on the internet. Obviously, I'm not showing you particular examples here because speaking publicly like this, there are obviously copyright issues. But I would also say that in addition to videos that are made online, it can be hugely helpful and useful if you and the children make video recordings too. A way for children to connect with you and continue with their learning in asynchronous time. Videos are easy to make on a smartphone. They're useful to be able to get children to go over things out of an online lesson. You can use them to revise vocabulary or language structures, asking questions and leaving gaps for the children to answer or repeat what you say. They can be useful for input on topic work, for example, explaining the differences between mammals and reptiles. They're also useful for reading stories or picture books, which children can then watch and rewatch. And you can also use these videos in your remote lessons, and it saves your energy. You don't have to retell the story 3 times. You can show the video and use the pause. So it's a way of saving your energy, making children feel closer and connected to you, and building up autonomy and responsibility for learning, because children have access and can use those videos outside the actual online class time. And when children themselves make videos, this is a wonderful way of personalizing learning and getting children to speak and show what they know. They can talk about things such as their family, their favorite food, and in upper primary, it may be, for example, their views on particular issues such as climate change. Some videos may be shown to the class in synchronous lessons for comments and responses. You always need to model exactly the kind of video you're looking for. It mustn't be left open. There needs to be a very clear framework or template, as for example, if you ask children to make a video recording of their seashore poems. And short videos are also very often useful for the purposes of assessment. I just want to show you now, so you can see how this works, an example of a 6-year-old child, and she's actually repeating food vocabulary as part of preparation for the story. The sound quality coming from her computer is not very good, but you can hear the child herself. And as you listen to this, just think about what are the benefits of a young child like this being able to work in this way, and pop your ideas into the chat box. So let's just watch this little video now. Can you hear? I'm not sure if you can hear the video. Don't worry, never mind. I mean, actually, what is happening there is that there's a tray of food, similar to the one I showed you for the objects, actually. And on screen, the teacher, well, it's actually me, and I'm saying, can you repeat the words after me? And the child is, at a computer and practicing saying the words. And what is wonderful about that is that she is working in a completely autonomous way, at her own time, at her own pace. And I think there are extraordinary benefits of that. And when you, as the class teacher, are the person on the video, this also gives the child huge security and that connection and positive relationship with you, which is really important. Okay, so we've had a look then at 8 areas of resources. And what I would like to do now is to kind of pull things together by talking about 10 key principles of online engagement with children. Because just as in our face-to-face classes, we want to engage the whole child and make learning interactive, varied, and creative. And so here are 10 principles. The first one, so important, believe in yourself. If you don't believe in yourself, it's hard for other people to. And you're already a good teacher. This is just a different medium. Bring to the party all the skills you have. Build on the familiar. Adapt what you already know how to do to a new situation. Although, of course, it's helpful to learn new tools, Padlet, Mentimeter, Google Forms, but it's not primarily what it's about. You're the most important educational and instructional resource in developing children's enjoyment and confidence in learning English and what matters most. The second principle, establish your virtual presence. Eye contact, well, we can't have direct eye contact, but you need to look at the camera directly. You need to try and have good lighting. I know it's difficult for all of us at home, but try not to be in shadow. You need to use clear, confident body language, vary your voice, stand up and move about. When you haven't got a PowerPoint presentation, you can do that very easily. Make sure you include everybody, nominate children when they're to speak, make that personal connection all the time, and use pre-recorded videos when appropriate. If you're teaching a lot of remote lessons during any one day, it can be exhausting to, for example, be retelling a story 2 or 3 times. Use a recorded version. So establish your virtual presence. The next principle, effective teaching for effective learning. You probably may know this quote. It's one that I use a lot in my sessions, so forgive me if you've heard it from me before, but I love it. And it's, children don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And that comes actually from Jane Arnold's book on affect, published by CUP. And that is true face-to-face, but it's even more important online. That rapport and positive relationships are crucial. Spend time at the beginning of a class more than you would face-to-face. Greeting, talking to children, asking how they are, what they've been doing. Remember the disruptive and emotionally stressful time that children have been going through. Use humour and fun. For example, everyone can come to class in a hat or a crazy hat, or wearing a t-shirt of their favorite color, or even you could have in their favorite pajamas, or with their favorite drink or snack. Well, actually, perhaps you wouldn't want to do a drink. It might be a bit health and safety for the computers. They might also choose different virtual backgrounds. Where am I today? And they're on a sunny beach. Use inclusive language and prioritize bonding together as a community. It's so important for laying the groundwork for learning. The next principle, make learning personal. Draw on the home context as much as possible to make learning personal. When children feel your care and interest, this boosts their self-esteem and makes learning memorable. For example, activities involving personal toys, objects from around the home, photos, show and tell, go and get an object from your bedroom, a virtual tour, maybe, get children to record their videos and send them to you. Always giving clear instructions and a model. Nominate children and make sure everyone is included. The importance of personalization can't be stressed too much, especially when children are sitting in a room, maybe with a parent to hand, but just in front of a screen. The next principle, curiosity is key. Keep children curious and guessing, predicting a story from pictures, maybe showing them the close-up of a partial picture and they guess what it is as a way of introducing a topic. What's in the bag games. Keep up a pace, although you won't be able to keep up the same pace as you do face-to-face, and keep it interactive. And don't feel frustrated if you can't cover the same amount of ground as in a face-to-face class, because it's kind of inevitable. We have to relax into it, and we can only do what we can do, and it's more important to keep the children emotionally engaged and with us than to get through an unrealistic lesson plan, for example. The next principle, give children choice and voice. In other words, give options and agency in what they do and how they do it. This fosters investment and ownership of learning. If you yourself decide what to do, you're more invested in it. And it also leads to greater autonomy and responsibility for learning. You can give children options between different activities. Do you want to sing a song or act out the story? Jump up and down if you want to sing the song. Or you can use an online poll, of course, or use emoticons. And we saw examples of this, for example, with the dolphin project, that children actually research 3 questions that they choose, or the questions that they're interested in. The next principle, kiss and make learning visible. Okay, so this is to do with chunking learning stages and activities into bite-sized bits. In other words, KISS, which I'm sure a lot of you know stands for keep it short and sweet. Okay, you can review with emojis, with thumbs, with colors. I talked about that earlier, in transitions between activities. And I would do it much more frequently than in your face-to-face classroom. Maybe in my face-to-face classroom, I only do a review at the end of each lesson. Teaching remotely, it makes sense to review between transitions, between stages of the lesson, to keep children with you and to constantly remind them what they're learning and how well they're doing. And you need also to encourage positive self-reflection and give lots of positive feedback. So kisses in that sense too. You know, you're drawing your heart on your mini whiteboard. The next principle, provide physical breaks. Children need these in a physical classroom but even more so in front of a screen, when it's really tiring for them to listen and concentrate for 30 or 45 minutes, or even longer sometimes, although I recommend not. If you have any choice in the matter, keeping it short is much better, and building in things that they do outside the lessons. And you can mark transitions between activities, maybe with a gym activity with the puppet, or an action rhyme, or a song. The next principle, involve parents. Of course, we want to involve our parents whatever mode we're teaching in, but in an online teaching situation, clear communication with parents is more important than ever, with guidelines on content and learning objectives and how they can give positive support. With very young children, parents will be present during your lessons. That's sometimes quite challenging too, but you can make practical use of them in doing simple games or other activities with their child. And the last principle, the 10th, last but not least, connect synchronous and asynchronous learning. By doing this, you make a connection between the virtual world of the classroom and the real world of home in a way that maximizes opportunities for learning. For example, children might learn how to make a snapdragon in one of your online lessons and then try it out on their family at home. Or they might learn how to make an origami book in the lesson and then complete it with information about a wild animal of their choice. For example, you'd have to set that up very clearly as a template and bring their book to the next lesson to show and tell the class. Or they can make finger puppets in the lesson, which they then use with their family to act out a story. Or you might ask children to bring to the next class 3 objects they can find that they associate with the season, which they'll then take turns to show and guess the season. Or you might set up an inquiry-based question, as we saw with the dolphins, and children do their research and then report back. So this brings us to the end of the session. We've looked at practical ideas based on, I wonder if you can remember what they were, based on using puppets, using real objects, using actions, using show and tell, using mini whiteboards, using art and craft, using images, and using video recordings. And we've extracted 10 key principles of online engagement with children. And just before the end, I've only touched on stories a couple of times during this session, if we can move to the next slide. But of course, stories are a wonderful way of engaging children in virtual time. So I'd just like to draw your attention to this Story Time with Carol series of videos. I made these videos during the lockdown in collaboration with Macmillan Education because I wanted really to support teachers and parents and children learning at home during the lockdown. And I've actually heard from teachers in many countries all over the world about how they've been using these stories. Each story, there's a video of the story and a video with teaching tips. And you can use them in synchronous or asynchronous time. And the teaching tips give you a wealth of ideas of how to exploit them, whether you're teaching online or face-to-face. And that video of Neria that we were going to show you earlier, that is her following one of these story videos. So I put these out there for you to make use of. If they're useful for you, then that will be absolutely great if you want to make use of them. Okay, so that really brings me to the end of my session. Thank you very much. Thank you so much, everybody out there, and from all the amazing, it's so wonderful to be with you all from everywhere in Mexico and other places in Latin America too. And if anyone has any questions, then I think we'll move to the questions now.
Thank you, Carol, for this practical and interesting talk. Thank you very much. Well, before go on, let me thank viewers from other countries such as Argentina, Chile, Colombia, Venezuela, and India. Yes, we have some teachers from India. And from many states from Mexico, such as Michoacán, Tamaulipas, Oaxaca, Nuevo León, Coahuila, Hidalgo, Baja California Sur, Sinaloa, Morelos, Tlaxcala, San Luis Potosí, Jalisco, Guanajuato, Quintana Roo, Guerrero, Nayarit, Estado de México, Sonora, Chiapas, Veracruz, for almost all the country. Thank you, all of them, saying hello to you, Carol.
That's wonderful to see so many people from all over Mexico. Oh, goodness, I wish I was there. I loved it so much when I was there in February. Fantastic.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
we're very happy. And hello, everybody. Thank you for being with us. Let's now move to questions and comments from the audience. Georgina Guerrero is asking, she said, Carol, please tell us, what is the most rewarding thing related in working with children?
What is the most?
The most rewarding thing related in working with children.
Well, the most rewarding thing, I think, is above all their engagement and pleasure and love of learning. I mean, I feel that our bottom line as teachers, what we want to do is to develop a love of learning in our children. We know that all our children are unique and different, and they are going to achieve and participate in different ways. And our fundamental job as teachers is to find the way to, as I like to say, reach and teach each child. And when we do that and make connections with children and see that pleasure in their learning, there's nothing more rewarding than that. Does that answer it, whether online or face-to-face?
Yes. Well, Allegra is asking for ideas for hybrid teaching, face-to-face and online students at the same time.
For hybrid teaching.
Hybrid teaching.
For hybrid teaching. Okay, that's a very good question, and it's very interesting as it's something that many people are moving into that situation as we come out of lockdown, but we may go back to lockdown. Things are so uncertain. We need small groups of children. And I actually think that a lot of the activities that we've had a look at today can work in that kind of hybrid situation. And things like the balance that I was talking about that's so important between synchronous and asynchronous learning, we then also create a similar balance between the face-to-face opportunities that we have with children, albeit socially distanced and with masks and very different from what we're used to, but we balance that with the remote kind of teaching that we do as well. But there are also, it's a bit like a Venn diagram, I think, because there are some things that are going to be different for both groups of children, but there are other things that the children are going to be able to join in and participate in, whether they're with you face to face or seeing you on screen. For example, an action rhyme or game, no, not game, an action rhyme would be an example of that. So, yeah, but I mean, we would actually need a whole nother webinar to explore that, but I'm really glad you brought it up. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Some teachers are asking how to catch the attention from a student that doesn't want to participate in this type of activities.
Right, I think that's another excellent question, and it's a real challenge. And I think the number one principle is no pressure and no obligation. We have to remember, I mean, this is a difficult time for all of us as adults, and children, sometimes it's very scary for children what's happening, especially if they haven't had things explained to them. And also if they feel uncomfortable. Some people feel uncomfortable, they don't want to put their camera on, they don't want to put their audio on. And my personal view is that, number one, we need to respect that. Number two, we need to inform ourselves as much as possible from the parents, from other teachers, why the situation is like this with this particular child, so that we understand. And we also need to look at alternative ways. We need to accept, okay, I know it's a risk in a way, because if the camera is never on, is the child really there, and so on. But I think pressure and obligation, the barriers are going to go up and there's going to be no learning. So it may be that with children like that, you are going to have to work in a slightly different way. It may be in a more traditional way, if you like, of sending emails with worksheets that they complete and send back to you. Obviously, that completely depends on the child, and every situation is different. But it's such a good question, because I think in every class there are likely to be children who really respond, who love it, who are extrovert and who love being in a kind of remote class, and other children who feel very uncomfortable about it. And as I say, I think we need to respect that, inform ourselves, and explore alternatives.
Okay. Aswani is asking about teenagers. She asked, how can we engage teenagers in learning English, and what strategy can we use to teach grammar to teenagers without being so methodic and boring?
Okay. Teenagers, I mean, I have to say my sort of area is more primary, but I think with teenagers, there are several things. First of all, that principle I had about choice and voice is more important than ever. That we have to recognize that by the time children are teenagers, the source of motivation is no longer you. As a teacher of young children, you have the power to motivate your children. But by the time they're teenage, definitely not. It's very uncool. So the way in is to get the choice and the voice. And that means, giving autonomy in what they're going to do, whether it's building up an e-zine or a blog, and finding that out, maybe, through polls. You can use online polls to find out what they'd like to do, how they'd like to do it, to also form, breakout sort of buddy groups to work together. And I think as far as grammar goes, I mean, my response is really hands-off grammar, to actually have more like a task-based approach where the grammar comes out of the activities that the children, well, they're not children anymore, that the teenagers are involved in doing. And I know we all have syllabuses to get through and course books to cover and so on and so on. But I think at this time, it's really important not to feel pressured, and hopefully school administrators not to pressurize us to sort of get through the syllabus in terms of a tick list of things. It's far more important at the moment to keep, whether young children or teenagers, engaged and learning. But it is a different set of issues with teenagers. I mean, the activities that we've looked at today are obviously no way suitable. It's a very different approach that you're going to need.
Okay, and we almost finished. The time have run very quick, and this is the last question that I can read. But teachers have asked about parents. For example, Maria Cristina says, how can I give my students voice when many of the parents say, I don't understand? So they decide that the children don't make English homework. I have heard from other parents when teachers, when parents don't speak English, it's quite difficult to help children to learn or to have the support from parents. How can help children in those cases?
I think that's a very good question. They're all good questions. They're excellent questions. And I think the collaboration with parents is very important. And yes, it can be quite challenging when parents themselves either are not willing to get involved with their children's progress and education, or they don't feel they have the confidence to do that. But there are ways in which we can give guidelines to parents to support their children's learning, even when they don't speak English. For example, a simple thing, which is perhaps more appropriate, well, it is more appropriate for primary than secondary, is, teach your mum, and if we can get the parents on board with that, it's a lovely strategy, because actually, as we know, when you teach something to someone, it helps you learn it yourself. So if parents are willing to be taught through vocabulary or whatever it is by their children, so there are a range of strategies that we can use. And I think importantly, one of the things is to keep the communication door open with parents. So to be in contact with them regularly, obviously in Spanish, not in English, about what you're doing in your classes, your expectations of the children, and so on. I mean, I do know from what's happened here in Spain, that for some teachers it's been a real burden. They've had, parents of all their children contacting them and asking for individual advice, and that can be very hard for you to manage. So I think preventively giving regular communications and information helps a lot. And individual discussions with parents, yes, but I know only up to a point, because if you're teaching a full timetable and you've got hundreds of children, that's not particularly realistic. But there certainly are guidelines of things that we can do to get parents on board.
Okay, thank you, Carol. Well, now it's time to say goodbye. Thank you for joining us in this webinar with Carol Reed. And please keep connected through our social media at MX British. Thank you and see you soon. And thank you very much, Carol.
My pleasure. Thank you very much, Adriana. And thank you everyone out there for attending. Lovely to see you all.
See you soon.